Welcome to the Parsha class. We are learning Parshat Devarim. It is the beginning of the last book of the Torah, of the 5 books of Moses, and it is unique in a number of ways. One of the ways we'll be talking about in great detail, because we're going to look at one of the original sources on this, the Ramban's introduction to Sefer Devarim. But basically, the entire book, and especially from the beginning, is just a long speech. Moshe, these are his last days. He's giving sort of a reminder of the Jewish people, what they've gone through in the desert, mostly the mistakes they made, but he says it kind of gently and sort of hints, as we say. Rashi tells us multiple places throughout the Parsha. We'll talk about some details, but throughout the Parsha, there are place names that aren't real places, and they're really just hints to what the Jewish people did there, or what they did incorrectly, really. And that's the main gist of the book, is really mostly a reminder of that. And that's basically a summary of the Parsha in a nutshell. And this is basically Moshe's last speech and the introduction to it, anyway. So with that said, we're now going to go into a deep dive into some of the verses. Before we do that, though, we're going to look at that Ramban, that introduction I told you about. So the Ramban tells us, first of all, the Ramban has an introduction to all of the 5 books. He also has introductions into some of the Parshiot also, interestingly enough, but we're not going to talk about that. So in his introduction, he basically always sets down what the point of the book is. What makes this a book? Why are there 5 books of Moses? Why not just one giant book of Moses, right? What separates this from the others? So all of them are different. All of them are unique. All of them have a certain focus. So what's the focus of this book? How is it different? So he says, first of all, it's called Mishneh Torah. It's a review of the Torah. So a lot of the book of the Devarim is actually elsewhere in the Torah, and it's now Moshe saying it over again in his more or less his own words. And that's actually what's very fascinating about this book, is that it's Moshe's words. All of the other books where Hashem spoke and Moshe was the court reporter, just typing in whatever Hashem said, word for word, letter for letter, exactly as he was told. Obviously, some of the events of the Torah didn't happen until afterwards. So there's a question of, when did Moshe write it? Did he know about it before it happened? That sort of thing. We're not going to get into that now. It's an interesting discussion, but let's suffice it to say that Moshe didn't seem to know what was going to happen. He some of the things that happened were his own mistakes. If he would have known, for instance, that whatever he did wrong at the Mei Meriva with the bitter waters, whatever it is he did, whether it is he got angry or he spoke not nicely or whatever it is he did, he hit the rock instead of speaking to the, whatever the number of answers are to whatever he did wrong there. If he would have known that would have been a sin, he probably would have avoided it, logically speaking. If he would have known that sending the spies would have led the Jewish people to stray and be in the desert for another 40 years, he probably would not have sent the spies. Right? He was a smart man. So he was no fool. So obviously he didn't know what would happen. So what does it mean he wrote it down? So it could be, there are commentaries that say it could be that when he wrote it down originally before it happened, he wrote it down without spaces. So he wrote it one long word, and it was what his job was when he was allowed to do it, was to put spaces where they belonged and make them into actual words that could be translatable, which makes a lot of sense, by the way, in terms of Sometimes when we interpret the Torah, we interpret like the last letter of this word plus the first letter of the next word. How can you do that? They're different words. But they're not. If they're originally given as one big word, they're one big word, and you can make those kinds of interpretations and such. The so that's what the Ramban continues with, and what's unique about this particular book is that it's more his words. It's Moshe speaking, and it's Moshe's prophecy. And besides the actual like grammar and how it's first person, much more than the other books of the Torah. The Jewish people do this. Moshe did that. So it's the narrator, if you will. The narrator is an obviously all knowing narrator, and third person narration. Here it's really first person. We did this. I did this. You told me to do that. So it's all me. It's all very first person, which is a very different book as it is. How is it possible? So there we have different levels of prophecy. We've got the 5 books of Moses, which is Moshe's prophecy. It's really God spoke more directly to him. Then we have the next level of prophecy, which is the prophets, the book of Yoshua, Isaiah, all those books. They're a little less. The prophet is a little more removed from Hashem at that point. So it's still prophetic. It's still you could still learn a lot of things from it, but not the same way. In fact, the Talmud, for instance, when it learns things from verses, it never learns a law from verses in the rest of Tanakh. Only from verses in the 5 books of Moses can they interpret out of the letters, out of the word. There's an extra letter, it's a weird spelling, whatever it is, they can interpret out of that. They can interpret a law. The only thing that the Talmud uses the other books of the Tanakh for is to define a word, for instance, right? A word is used; it's an unusual word. This word is also used in Tanakh, and in context, it makes a lot of sense here. So we're going to reapply that same definition here. So the Talmud does that sometimes, but never does it use the actual structure of the sentence to learn a law, the way the Talmud would with the books of the Torah, 5 books of Moses. So this last book, the book of Devarim, is a different level of prophecy because it's a human being speaking from himself, but he's been inspired for many, many years by Hashem's voice. So the question is Devarim, are these words that we're about to learn, are these God's words or are these Moshe's words? So it's a very interesting question, and there's a lot of commentaries who've written about it since then, since the Ramban here. But um, as the Ramban points out, Kvar Namru Lo Kulan Messinai. All of this was given at Har Sinai. Even Devarim was given at Sinai. It's one of the 5 books of Moses. All of it was given, and we learned in Yaakov just last week that the Mishnah was given at Sinai, and the Tehillim was given at Har Sinai, and everything. Basically, the entire corpus of Torah was somehow alluded to, at least they hinted to, or at least the rules that they used were all given at Har Sinai. So there's nothing really original. You can't just come up with I'm going to write my own Bible commentary. It's going to have nothing to do with any of the older commentaries. I'm going to ignore Rashi, Ramban, Rambam. I'm going to ignore everybody and just write my own based on what I feel, based on what I've seen in the New York Times. Right. So you do that, you're not from Har Sinai anymore. You've cut off Har Sinai from the interpretation. So plenty of people do that. There's lots and lots of books of translations of the Bible and commentaries on the Bible that have nothing to do with the actual events of Har Sinai and the Masorah, the chain that's connected Har Sinai to the Torah we're learning right now. So this Devarim, even though it's Moshe's voice, quote unquote, it's a very inspired voice, so much so that it was actually given at Har Sinai, and perhaps not written down yet, as we explained, but certainly in the exact form that it's in, but certainly it was given then. All right, so that's just a quick summary of his rather lengthy introduction, but it's definitely worth reading. It's in the source sheet that I sent out in the text, in the email. Okay, so let's go straight into um, the first, actually second verse of Devarim. So the first verse basically says where Moshe is speaking from, who he's speaking to, where they are, etc., etc. All right, the next verse, verse 2, chapter 1, verse 2 of Devarim says, Achad Asar Yom, 11 days, Mechorev Derech Har Seir Ad Kadesh B'nai, is an 11-day journey from Chorev, which is another word for Har Sinai, for Mount Sinai. It was 11-day journey from there to this mountain called Seir. To Kadesh Barnea, through this place called Mount Seir. So why do we need to know that it's 11 days? So the Kli Yakar tells us an amazing thing, and this really brings up the subject that we're up to at this time of the year, and that is, he says, what's Chorev? Chorev means, is another name for Har Sinai, but Chorev comes from the word Harab, which is to destroy. It's sort of like it's sort of ominous. It's sort of like there's something like bad going on. So why do we need to? What's the 11 days from something bad? What's going on? So the Kli Yakar has a rather short point here that he wants you to know, and that is, there are 11 days in the Jewish calendar when we remember something bad. In other words, what particular bad? The bad that we're thinking about this time of the year, the destruction of the temple, which is also called Chorev. It's called it's a destruction. It's a ruin. So so what the Kli Yakar tells us is that there are 11 days in the calendar when we mourn the destruction of the Beit Hamikdash. What are the 11 days? So these 9 days, that's pretty easy. So there's 2 more days. One is the 17th of Tammuz that started the 3 weeks. It's interesting he doesn't include the entire 3 weeks, but the 17th of Tammuz when we fast, and the 10th of Tevet, which is in December or whatever it is, or January, depending on when it falls out. So that's also a fast day, also for the destruction of the temple. So we have the 10th of Tevet, the 17th of Tammuz, and these 9 days together, that makes 11 days. That's the 11 days that we mourn the destruction of the temple. So it's alluded to here in the second verse of Devarim. The 11 days that it took to leave. What did we leave? We left Har Sinai. We left. So that's we shouldn't have left. We should have wanted to stay there forever. But Chazal tell us that the children of Israel ran away from Har Sinai like children leaving school. the bell rings and you're running out, right? So that's how little we respected the great gift that we received, and that's probably why over time it devolved to the point where we'd have to lose everything that we gained from at that point. Lost almost everything, I should say. We never really lost, for example, the Shekhinah. Hashem is still with us, but it takes a lot more to feel that. Right? It's very easy to go through life and never feel it at all, like most people out there. So that's one thing. Okay, we're going to skip to chapter 1, verse 5. In chapter 1, verse 5, it says, again, this is giving the details of where they were, etc., etc. And it says, Be'ever hayardain, be'eretz Moav, hoil Moshe, be'er et haTorah hazot lemor. Over the Jordan River, in the land of Moab, that's where Moshe is going to explain this Torah, saying, And that's the sort of like the introduction. And now from this point on, it's going to be Moshe speaking. So, but it says that he's going to be'er et Torah, to explain the Torah. So this is going to require some explanation, because I don't see an explanation of the Torah. There's going to be more details of the Torah, that's for sure, but it's not always clear that it's going to be an explanation. What does it mean he's explaining it? So there's going to be an interesting answer from Rashi. Rashi says, Be'er et Torah, it says, B'shivim lashon per shalahem. He told them the Torah in 70 languages. 70 languages. He basically translated, he basically did an art scroll, right? And he did 70 translations of the Torah into 70 different languages that he gave to the Jewish people at this point. Which is strange, right? Amongst other reasons, nobody spoke these 70 languages. Nobody. He translated into French. Very nice. Moshe thinks of translating it into French. Nobody here speaks French. It's just gobbledygook. You're just speaking a language that nobody understands. I just heard that in history, interesting, in Lithuanian history, actually, after World War I and before World War II, Lithuania was independent for a little while, about 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it is, before the Soviet Union took it over. So they were independent, and they had certain rules. One of them is, because they hated Russia so much, they made Russian an illegal language. You couldn't speak it. Certainly, you couldn't speak it in official positions and in court or whatever. So there's certain languages were allowed. Amongst them were Lithuanian, obviously, Polish, because a lot of people, Poland, it's complicated, but Polish, Poland had taken over Lithuania in certain times as well, and actually Yiddish was an official language, was an accepted official language, which made it very interesting, because there was one particular the representative of the Jewish side, I forget his name, I think Wilhelm, I think was his last name, I'm not sure, Baruch Wilhelm, something like that. Anyway, so he was the representative of the Jewish minority, and he spoke to the court, and he had an official post on the parliament, et cetera, et cetera. The only languages he spoke were Hebrew, Yiddish, and Russian. He didn't speak Lithuanian. So the only language they would allow him to speak officially was Yiddish. So he spoke in Yiddish, and the court the court reporter wrote down, Mr. Wilhelm is speaking in his own language, and that's it. They can translate it, because nobody spoke Yiddish. He's speaking Yiddish in front of a bunch of people who didn't speak any Yiddish. Right, and but that's because he couldn't speak Russian, because Russian was an illegal language. So it's a strange. So this is I'm picturing the same thing that's happening here. Here's Moshe Rabbeinu speaking to 3 million people or whatever it is, and he's speaking the entire Torah. He's saying the Torah over and over again, 70 times in different languages that nobody speaks. Nobody understood a single word. He said it in Russian, English. Okay, there wasn't English yet. English didn't exist yet. Anglo-Saxon, Anglo and Saxon, and whatever other languages he translated it into, Germanic. I don't know. All right. The language of the Franks. I don't know. I don't think it was French yet. I don't know. Whatever it was, he translated to all these languages, and nobody understood it. It was all Greek to them. All right. So why did he do that? How does that explain the Torah? It says be'er. Be'er means explain. So Moshe explained the Torah to the Jewish people. Explain it by translating into so many languages? That doesn't make sense. What's going on? So the Ketav Sofer answers. He quotes this Midrash, and he quotes the Rashi that B'shivim lashon pirsha lahem. He translated into several languages. It's Tzarich lehavin. He says, Lama bir B'shivim lashon. Why did he have to translate it to 70 languages? Especially now, now that they're going into the land, they're not going to be speaking French in the land. They're not going to be speaking German in the land. Why do they have to translate it into all these languages? They're not going to be speaking Zimbabwean. Right? So why translate it into these 70 core languages? By the way, it's interesting. I remember learning back when I was in college. I remember learning because I was an English major, so I had to learn languages. And part of um, what's the study of languages? Oh my gosh, that's the one. One of the things you learn in linguistics is that there are 70 core languages. There actually are 70 core languages. Yeah. And for example, German isn't one of them, but Germanic is. And Germanic is the core of English, for instance. Greek, Latin, those are all those are three of the 70 core languages. There's all kinds of Eastern Asian languages. There's African languages, but there's certain cores. They have certain things. Many of them have some things in common. Um, I was amazed. I was like, wow, we said that too. I almost jumped up in class. 70. What an interesting number. All right, so the so he says here a very important thing, and this is again, I don't know if this was intentional. Maybe it was intentional, like from up high, but a lot of the things we're going to say is very relevant for this time of the year, for when we're talking about Tisha B'av and the suffering of the Jewish people, and over the last few years, or last 2000, when I say few. So he says an interesting thing here. Um, he says they nearly. He says to me, it seems it's a kavana bezeh shlo yomer kedat haminim v'apikursim. You shouldn't say like the people who doubt Hashem like to say shlo nitna Torah lak b'midbar be'eretz Yisrael. The Torah was given in the desert. It was given so that the Jews would keep it in Israel. Nowadays, in where we live, it's not really relevant anymore. The Torah is relevant for Israel. The Torah is relevant where people speak Hebrew. The Torah is relevant over there. Or what people say nowadays, my grandfather was a rabbi in the shtetl in Europe, 200 years ago. For him, Judaism made sense. Judaism makes sense everywhere. In the shtetl, the Jewish people didn't speak Yiddish in the desert. So wherever there's Jewish people, and whatever languages they're speaking, the Torah is relevant. That's what it means that he explained the Torah. He showed the relevance of the Torah. No matter where you live, no matter what time period you live in, no matter what language you speak, the Torah is always relevant. That's what it means. He explained the Torah in 70 languages. He showed the relevance of Torah in 70 different cultures. Every language has its own culture, right? 70 nations. Exactly. Right? The 70 nations of the world, the 70 languages of the world. It's all related, and that's how and that's why when Moshe explained the Torah, it doesn't mean he just explained it like that's what this means. I see that little extra letter over there. That's what that. Besides all that, he also he showed how the Torah is relevant no matter when and where you exist. The Jewish people need to have survived through a lot of things, and the only way we were able to do that is with Torah. We'll talk about that later as well. All right. Let's skip to chapter 1, verse 8. So we're going to be pretty focused on chapter 1 today, by the way. There's a lot of verses in chapter 1, and there's a lot to say. And by the way, obviously, everything we're saying now isn't all there is to say. So God willing, there's still material for classes next year and for years to come, God willing. All right. But let's just skip to verse 8 for a moment and see what the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, the holy Or HaChaim of Morocco, teaches us. The verse says, Re'eh, trying to rhyme with the next word. Re'eh, natati lifnehem et haaretz. Look, I've given you this land. Bo urshu et haaretz. Go take possession of the land. Asher nishba Hashem la'avotechem, that Hashem promised to Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he would give to them and to their descendants after them. Okay. we have an interesting grammatical thing that many people probably didn't notice. Re'eh is singular. You individual. Hey, you. Look at look at the land that I'm giving to you. Now this is going to be plural, right? And it starts with re'eh and then lifnechem. The third word is plural already. So again, look, hey, you, look at what we're giving to all of you. I wish there was a in the South to say y'all. Right? I wish we had that for every language I know. There's a you plural except English, except for the y'all. So there should be a word like that. It'd be very easy. It'd be much easier to translate that. He's saying, "Hey, you individual, look at what I've given y'all." And the Or HaChaim wants to know, why did we start singular and continue plural? It's a strange grammatical thing. It's, if this was an essay, I would use my red pen on that one, right? Circle a few things, underline a few things. So so obviously Hashem knows grammar. Moshe knows grammar. So what's happening? So he says, Omer b'tchila re'eh lashon yachid. L'gemar Omer lashon rabim. He starts with singular, continues with plural. Why? Lefi shebegeder ria shovim heim ki ish echad ve'ein hashenid b'neihem. The reason is because what's he telling them to do first? Re'eh, see. Each individual sees something differently. You can have two people looking at the same image, same event, and see it completely differently. So you're saying each individual, each one of you needs to look at this land that I'm giving y'all, because you all of you together have a mission that you have to accomplish together, but each one of you is going to see it differently individually. And it's an important thing. I'm sure you've seen that cartoon where there's two people standing on either side of the letter of the number, possibly 6, possibly 9, right? One's at the bottom of the 9, one's at the top of the 9, or bottom of the 6, whatever it is, and they're looking at the number and says, "I see a 6." The other one says, "I see a 9." Who's right? They're both right. That's, and if you draw the 6 in just the European way, it's going to look like a 9, right, upside down. So so each individual sees things differently, and that's good. We want people to have that. We want individuality. We want people to take things personally and to really put their heart into things and to care about things their own way. That shouldn't take away from the universal mission that we have as a people. We have a morality that we all are supposed to subscribe to, that we're all supposed to encourage other people to do. How are we supposed to encourage? That depends on the individual. Whatever I do isn't what somebody else should do, et cetera, et cetera. The morality should be the same. That's the plural. But how we teach others, how we encourage others, that's something that should be done. Individually. And here we have, especially we're looking at Israel, right? Israel is a great example of that. Everybody looks at Israel, even nowadays, in their own way. Like some people want to move there because they just want to be surrounded by a lot of Jews. Some people want to move there because they don't like what's happening in America. They think things are different in Israel. Some people want to move there because, for whatever reason, they like the government there. I don't know. There's all kinds of reasons. The holiness. Some people want to go because of the holiness of the land. They want to feel the holiness. Some people want to go because they know Hashem wants them to. They want to make Hashem happy, whatever that means. All right. So there's all different reasons, all individual different reasons, but the goal is the same. The goal is the same, and that Israel should be treated as a holy land again. Okay, so that's that. So that explains that Rashi. So again, I've mentioned it last week, but I'll mention it again. I think I mentioned it more than last week. But there's a very important concept that we've gone over. Now I realize we've said it lots of times. There's a very important concept, and that is that Rashi seems to be simple, seems to be like clear cut. Moshe taught the Torah in 70 languages, etc., etc. No problem, right? But when you look a little bit deeper, when you dig a little bit and start asking questions like 70 languages, they're standing around for days listening to Moshe speak different languages, like he knew somehow. And what's the point? It has a point. The point is that whatever actually happened, whether it was figurative or actually he translated the languages into 70 languages, there was a point to it, and the point was to show that Judaism is true everywhere. So we're going to skip a lot now. We're going to skip all the way. Yeah, we have time. Okay, good. We're going to skip all the way to chapter 1, verse 22. Chapter 1, verse 22. And this is talking about already the sin of the spies. Moshe spends quite a bit of time, especially in the first parsha, discussing the sin of the spies. Very, very relevant to us because that happened on Tisha B'Av, by the way. But aside from that, a lot of the reasons why it happened are still relevant today. Obviously, that's the kind of the point of learning Torah, and that is to learn the lessons that are still true and always have been, always will be. Okay, so let's just look at this next verse. It says, and this is, by the way, a strange verse. There's probably a lot more to say on this, but let's leave it with just trying to understand the Rashi, which is going to be enough of a challenge. Okay? It says, "V'tikruvun Eli." So all of the people came to me, Moshe speaking. Again, this is first person. Kulchem, all of you. V'tomru, and he said to me, Nishlacha anashim lifaneinu. Go send for us people ahead of us. V'yachperu lanu et haaretz. They're going to yachperu. How do they translate? Spy out the land. Spy out for us. Check out the land for us. V'yashivu otanu davar, and they're going to send back to us word. Et haderech asher nalaba, which way we should go up. Vet harim asher navo elehem, and the cities that we're going to go, the cities that they have over there that we're going to come to. In other words, they wanted to spy out the land, literally. Yeah, spy out is probably the best word. And reconnaissance here. And the Rashi tells us an interesting thing. Fascinating Rashi. Again, Rashi is supposed to be the simple explanation. So usually, when somebody says, I want so-and-so to bring back word, that just means I want them to come and tell me what happened. Bring back word is still a phrase that we use even in English, right? Literally, it says, "V'yashvu otanu davar." They should bring back to us word. So Rashi's bothered by this because usually, in an official document like the Torah, we don't need to use, phrases, idioms, or whatever. We just say what you mean. So it's if they wanted them to bring back a report, you'd say report, not word. So what is it that they want? Rashi says, short Rashi, four words. Actually, let me see if I can show you where it is.
In the commentary?
Yeah, it shows you in the Rashi.
Oh.
Yeah, right there. Let's see. Yeah, right there.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
so that's in Rashi's script. So it's a different script, but it's the same words. You can try to follow along. There's only four words. The first word is be'eze, means in which. Next word is lashon, language. Hem is the third word. They, medabrim, speak. Be'eze lashon he medabrim. The people asked for the spies to bring back a report about what language the people speak. What language do they speak? Those 4 words. Be'eza lashon hem medabrim. That's what Rashi says it means. When they said bring back word, means literally word. Bring back the words. Bring back what language they speak. Okay? It's cute. Rashi's explaining something that we didn't know before about the mission of the spies, that they had to bring back a linguistics report. It's some sort of study that they were supposed to undertake of the languages used in the Canaanite area. All right? But it's strange, no? That I mean, of all things that we want to report on, it would make sense to bring back a report of which cities are fortified. They say that later also, but it makes sense to say which direction to go, where the passes are, where the roads are, where there's hilly areas, whatever. All of that makes sense. Military or strongholds where there's a place to get the upper hand. Okay, I get all that. Language? I need to know what language they're speaking. Why? Why is that important for a nation that I'm going to conquer? Right? I'm not learning their language so that I can speak to them and like have tea with them. We're not planning on keeping the Canaanites around. The idea really was to either chase them away or to kill them off, which is a scary thing. But really, the influence of the Canaanites is what led the Jewish people to do a lot of the bad things that they eventually did that destroyed the first temple. So we needed to get rid of those Canaanites one way or the other. Convince them to convert, whatever, okay, whatever. But we definitely didn't want to, play parcheesi with them. This wasn't this was not a social visit. So what's happening? So the Guru Arya, that's the Maharal of Prague, who had a commentary on Rashi. So he writes, Ki ayin lashonot hem keneged ayin umot. There are 70 root languages because of the 70 nations of the world, like we said before. And you said, L'chol uma natan la lashon. In each nation has its own language. V'halashon hu metichas al ha'uma. The language tells you something about the people. The way people speak. The famous thing that they say about the Eskimo, that they have 40 words for ice or whatever, or different kinds of snow and ice. Obviously, that's relevant because that's how they live. They need to know, is this going to be, is this the kind of ice that I can walk on? Is this the kind of ice I can fish on? So there's different names for the different kinds of ice. By the way, in English, there are also a number of words for ice. Yeah, I don't know them all. I don't know, if I was a chemist, I would know certain levels of how frozen something is, right? Different degrees of Kelvin or whatever, right? Or I'd know probably negative Kelvin. I don't remember. Anyway, so whatever it is, if I was a biologist or a geologist, I would know different kinds of tundra or whatever. So we have in English, there's a word for almost everything. There's a word for almost everything. Sometimes it's borrowed, right? There's plenty of words we use that are, from every single culture of the world. I'm thinking, sushi, right? Right. The foods, yeah, the easy ones, right? Sushi, linguine. So, but even like buffalo, right? Buffalo, I believe, is a Cherokee word. So we didn't have a word for it in English, right? King George in England didn't ever see a buffalo, so he didn't have a word for it. So we had to use the word that was being used by the people here. But it says something about the culture, right? There might have been people who lived next to buffalo who didn't have a word for it. They just called it animal because it was the only animal that the only big animal that they knew of. Who knows? I don't know. But the point is, you learn things about a culture by knowing that group's language. That's what they wanted the spies to come back with. What kind of people are we about to deal with? Are we dealing with gangsters? Are we dealing with peace-loving people? Are we with drugged out hippies? Who are we conquering? It's going to be a very different battle depending on who it is we're fighting. Are we fighting? Are we fighting warriors? Or are we fighting peaceniks? Eagles or doves? What's happening? Who are we dealing with? And do we have to go to war? Do we have to like kill them all off? We're kind of reluctant to do these kinds of things. We're not generally a violent group, and we don't want to be. That's for sure. And so that's why Rashi's translating this when he says they bring back davar, bring back literally word, which it means bring back what words they use, what kind of language they use. Do they speak nicely? Do they speak gently? Do they have words for art and beauty and things like that, or do they have only words for physical sensations? It would be a very big difference, depending on who would explain a lot more about who we're dealing with. Okay, we're going to look at another Rashi. It's interesting. We have a lot of Rashis today, and interpretations of the Rashis. Okay, so we're going to skip quite a bit to another 22 verses to chapter 1, verse 44. 144. And what this is talking about is a very, very tragic event. For me, it's one of the most painful events to read about in the Torah. Literally, one of my top three emotionally painful verses to read about. The Jewish people were told that they weren't allowed to go into the land. They wanted to go into the land. The spies came. They heard the report. They didn't want to go into the land anymore. They didn't trust in Hashem anymore. So they're punished. They have to go be in the desert for 40 years. A group of Jews say, no, we're going to go into the land. And they go into the land and they get crushed. They get destroyed by the Amorites who live there. It says, as we're going to see, they basically they took them down like bees. They chased them down and just destroyed them, killed them all off. It's terrible. One of the things that makes it very painful is because the Jewish people had just been too scared to go into the land and didn't trust Hashem. Now they're overconfident and don't trust Hashem. Now we're going to go into the land with our arms, with our weapons, with our Uzis. We're going to go into the land, our bombs or whatever. We're going to go in and we're going to take over. It's ours now. And what happens is the Jewish people get destroyed because it's not weapons that earns us Eretz Yisrael. It's our connection with Hashem, our learning Torah, as we're going to see very soon. But the Jewish people didn't learn the lesson. They thought the lesson was, we can go in and it's ours. That wasn't the lesson. And what's painful to me is that over and over again, I see people, I think it seems that people are doing this over and over again, where they totally mistake the lesson that's supposed to be learned. They learn the exact opposite lesson. And they go and they do ridiculous things that get them even more hurt. It's very painful. But Hashem should help. Anyway, the Amorites came out. Hayushiv Bahar Hahu, the ones who lived on the mountain, they came out. Likratchem, they came out against you. V'yirdefu etchem, and they chased you. Kasher tasena advorim, like bees do. Viktu etchem, and they destroyed you. They crushed you. Beseir ad Charma. They from all the way from Seir until Charma. So, according to one interpretation, that means they went from city to city, chasing down these the last remains of these Jewish fighters and just wiped them out. Followed after them and destroyed them. But Rashi says something else. Rashi wants to know why bees. Why bees? Could be any animal. It could have chased them down like wildebeests. Could have chased them down like lions, tigers, bears. Oh my, anything. Why? Why bees? So Rashi says, and this is, if you're interested, I can show you where it says that because it's Rashi. Aleph Mem Dalet. So Mem Dalet is. So right, so yeah, right there. So the last line is the last line in the second, the last word on the second line is the Rashi. All right, so he's explaining what it means. Kasher ta'asena hadvarim, just like bees do. Says ma hadvora hazot, just like a bee. Keshehi maka et ha'adam miyad meta, when it stings a person, it immediately dies. Afhem, so too they, kishayu nogim bahem miyad metim. When they attacked you, they died also. Right? A bee, when it stings, it dies. It's protecting itself. It does it out of protection. It doesn't know that it's going to die. It doesn't sacrifice its life, but it needs to protect its hive. It needs to protect the queen. Yeah. All right. The Brisker Rav, the Grizz as he's called in yeshiva circles, gives an explanation as to why. Another explanation as to why particularly bees and what Rashi is trying to say about all this. So first he quotes the pasuk, he quotes the Rashi, and then he says, Tzarech bir, we need to explain what is this pasuk trying to teach us? What's the lesson we're supposed to learn from the fact that the Amorites acted like bees? Amorites like bees. Okay, the bee's knees for the Amorites. All right. And he says that Venira, it seems to me the hine kisharoim echad notin maka l'sheni hasheni enenu machzir lo maka tachat machtata. If somebody would see, if somebody goes out and sees that, let's say there's two warriors on team A and there's a team B, and one of the warriors from team A touches somebody from team B and dies. What would the other warrior from team A do at this point? Run away. This war is not for me. This is not going to work out. I would want to preserve my life. Right? Self-preservation is one of the, if not the number one. It is the, according to sociologists, it is the number one desire of life, of all creatures. Self-preservation, above all else. You don't care about how healthy you are. You don't care about what a nice home you have. As long as you're alive, that's step one. Then there's a whole gradation of needs. Okay, we're not going to talk about all that. But I don't want to die is an instinct for all creatures. Bees might not have the intelligence to know that that's what killed the bees stinging. So another bee might not know that. But here's human beings. These are Amorites. They might not have been super intellectuals, but they're not stupid. They had a culture. They had a society that they were able to build. They weren't just nomads. They lived somewhere. They knew things. And they saw another guy die from killing a Jew. Why would they continue to do that? Says the Brisker Rav, and very, very relevant for today. The Jewish people need to know they're sometimes going to be surrounded by Gentiles, sometimes, and some of them hate Jews so much that self-preservation is not the first priority. They are going to be willing to hurt Jews even in spite of their own safety and security. There have been a number of cultures that have seen and have recognized the idea of the brain drain of when they lose when they've expelled the Jewish population from their culture, from their country. They've experienced economic ruin, so they've stopped the expulsions and brought the Jews back. This has happened many times in France, in England, and in other countries. In the last 2,000 years, we've been expelled from almost every single country in the world, even in America in a certain part. During the Civil War, the parts that were conquered by General Grant, he kicked out the Jews who lived in that area. He later apologized for that. It wasn't completely anti-Semitic. It had to do with carpetbagging. I'm not going to go into all the American history. It's a little complicated. But indeed, Jews have been expelled from every single culture. They've even been expelled from Israel. About 20 years ago, from Gush Katif, the Israeli government came in and took Israeli settlers and kicked them out of their own land. So, very, very true statement when I say every single country that I can think of where Jews have lived, they've been kicked out of in the last 2,000 years. And sometimes, like I said, they've been brought back when that country's realized that it's not good for the economy, not good for anything. But there have been countries that, despite that, have kicked out the Jews, killed Jews, destroyed their own economies over and over again because they hate Jewish people so much.
Preserving something about that is fundamental to their society.
Perhaps, yeah.
Which could be something that's threatened by the Torah,
Right.
by God, by
But
commandments.
yeah, could be.
Undermined. Some kind of fundamental power.
Right.
Undermined.
Could be, yeah. Could be, right. Could be that they think we really want to be able to do such and such, but we feel guilty about doing it because of the Jews and their commandments.
Right.
Could be.
And I don't want to have to change.
Right. Changing is hard, especially cultural. Changing a culture is virtually impossible. They feel threatened, and so they lash out, and that's how they lash out. Fundamentally.
Self-preservation of the culture,
right.
As opposed to the individual.
Right. So they're willing to sacrifice themselves, and that's happened over and over again in history, and that's what the Bris Chorev is trying to tell us is the lesson here of this verse in the Parsha. What this Rashi is saying, that the Jewish people need to realize that they're sometimes going to be surrounded by people who are willing to kill them in spite of their own self-preservation, in spite of their own security, in spite of their own economy. We can't rely on people.
Going to them was not only bad for the Jews, but also bad for the Amorites.
Exactly.
Because they need the influence of Moses and the Torah.
Yes, that could have helped them.
Otherwise, they're going to continue on with the things that are not healthy.
And they certainly did. Yep, that is true. No. This helps the class, by the way. That's one of the benefits of having in person, that people participate. I like that. Don't be sorry. You're absolutely right. It's very good. It's a very good way to think about it. That we have to realize that they're trying to preserve something. It might not be a healthy thing, and we can help them fix it. But if they're going to be attacking us, they're going to lose, and we're going to lose.
Right.
So it's a lose-lose. Yeah. All right. So we're finally getting to the next chapter, and this is really that we only have time for one last comment. And this comment, I think, really puts together everything we've been saying. It's very apropos. So chapter 2, verse 3. Chapter 2, verse 3 tells us, Rav lachem sov et hahar hazeh. You've been around this mountain too long. This is again going back to Har Sinai. Panu lachem tzafona. Go turn north. Go turn north. So the Chafetz Chaim quotes a Midrash. The Midrash tells us, interesting thing. The Midrash says, God was saying to the Jewish people, if you see him, meaning Esav, meaning the descendants of Rome and such, preparing to attack you, don't try to fight back. Don't try to resist. You're not going to win. When Rome is about to attack you, they're more powerful. There's no point in resisting. What should you do instead? Turn north until he passes by. That's it. It's Phona. Go turn north. Don't stick around. Turn north. Right. So and Hashem replies, Hashem, what are you talking about? His father. I'm sorry.
Who replies?
So this is the Jewish people replying to Hashem. So this is a midrash. So it's not a literal conversation. It's metaphoric. So Hashem is saying, Hashem tells the Jewish people, if Rome is about to attack, turn north. The Jewish people reply, what are you talking about, Hashem? His ancestor, his father, Yitzchak, Esav's father, right? Yitzchak blessed him, saying, you're going to live by the sword. You are going to be violent. And by telling us this, you're reinforcing that blessing, telling us to hide from him. How are we supposed to hide? Where are we supposed to go? You've given him all the power. You've given them the Nazi war machine. How are we supposed to hide from that? Where do we go? So Hashem answers the Jewish people. Again, this is all metaphoric. He responds, if you see him attacking you, flee, run away to the Torah. Go learn Torah. Run away into the Torah. So this is the advice. You want to survive Rome? You want to survive a war machine that's targeting you? Learn Torah. That's what the Midrash is saying. That's the Midrash. Can't argue with the Midrash. Okay. What do we gain from that literally for ourselves? So the Chavetz Chaim says that this is a very important lesson. This is what the source we have here. It's telling you that without learning Torah, the nations of the world have the upper hand. The nations of the world can do whatever they want to the Jewish people who don't have Torah. We have to strengthen ourselves with Torah, not just intellectual knowledge, but like we have to strengthen ourselves with a realization that we're surrounded by godliness. That's what Torah means. We learn Torah, that's what happens. And we create a different kind of society when we have a society of Torah. When we do that, the nations of the world can't destroy us. Yeah, they can kill an individual. They can kill 6 million individuals, but they can't destroy Judaism as long as there's Torah. And by the way, even individually, this helps. I know stories. The Gemara tells us in Chulin that a phrase, a verse in next week's Parsha, we might learn more about it next week also. The verse is Ein od milvado. There's nothing besides Hashem. That's the realization the Jewish people were supposed to get to through all this, the Torah and the Har Sinai and all of the events of the desert and the man and everything. We're supposed to teach them Ein od milvado. There's nothing besides Hashem. Hashem is the world. The world is Hashem's. That realization is supposed to be very powerful. The Gemara in Chulin tells us that there was a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Chanina, and there was a certain woman who was trying to do some sort of kishuv, some sort of magic on him. She was trying to basically take the dust out from under his feet, whatever she was trying to do, trying to kill him with some sort of magic. And he said over and over again this phrase, Ein od milvado, there's nothing besides him, there's nothing besides Hashem, and he was saved. She couldn't do magic on him when he was thinking those thoughts. I know personal stories. I have here a source, by the way, the Nefesh HaChaim, who says that people who think this way are elevated above nature. He goes into quite some detail. It's a long piece from a very Kabbalistic source, the Nefesh HaChaim. There's also translation there in English. But what he says there, this is the Rav Chaim of Volozhin, one of the main students of the Vilna Gaon. So he writes in Nefesh HaChaim that people who think Ein od milvado, there's nothing besides Hashem, just those 3 words, just think it and realize and really meditate on what the meaning of that phrase is, are saved from all suffering. I know stories. People told me stories. Actual survivors of the Holocaust told me stories of how they were walking under a bridge and there was a German guard right there looking straight at them. And they were thinking this phrase, Ein od milvado, over and over again, repeating it over and over again in their heads, walked straight under the nose of the German guard, who was looking right at them, and they were able to pass through into Switzerland or whatever they were going, and to freedom, and they were able to survive long enough to tell me the story. I've met people like this. This is an actual thing. This is a magic that works. It's obviously not magic. It's obviously the opposite of magic. It's realizing how Hashem controls the world, and that's what all of the teachings we've had here so far, all of the lessons of this entire parsha so far, has all been aiming towards this, that these terrible 11 days that we think about the destruction of the temple, the terrible things that some of the Gentiles of the world have done to the Jewish people, the exiles, and the beating them down with like even though it hurts themselves like bees, all of this can be avoided. All of this can be fixed if everybody focuses on the fact that we are God's people and we have a mission in life, and that mission is to create a better world for everybody. All right. With that, we'll stop the sharing and stop the live feed and stop the recording.